For the week of June 6th and further back, there have been almost no sports news in the world, and especially in Philadelphia, because of coronavirus. Things have been shut down, but right now things are on their way back, and I am more excited than ever. The NHL is working on their plan to get teams back into the NHL playoffs and get the Philadelphia Flyers their Stanley Cup. The NBA is also working to get their season started. 22 teams, including the Philadelphia 76ers, will be back in play to see who is going to the NBA Finals, like the Sixers. And the MLB players are working to figure out how much they're going to get paid so they can get their season back underway. But there is so much more to talk about on this week's episode of The Orange Line.
He had high hopes. He had high hopes.
Clap your hands, everybody, for Philadelphia 76ers.
Welcome back to the Orange Line, ladies and gentlemen. Philadelphia's first and only 7 for 7 sports podcast. May the Philadelphia Soul rest in peace. I am your host, Dr. PhD, here to break down some of the biggest news from the MLB, MLS, NBA, NHL, NFL, NLL, and OWL, all as it pertains to the city of brotherly love. Now, I should mention that this week's episode is going to be a little bit different since there is no sports news, but there is something very important to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing I want to say is Black Lives Matter. And the next thing I want to say is that the protests that are going on right now are very important, and it is affecting a lot of people, not just people of color, everyone who has been hurt by the police system and what is happening. So, that being said, I wanted to take this week's episode to be a reintroduction to the Orange Line, talk about the fact that this is going to be inclusive for all of the Philadelphia teams and anyone who loves the Philadelphia teams, but it's also going to be a time for me to talk about the teams and what they have said in response to everything that's going on in the world right now. And the first team I want to talk about is the Fusion. On June 3rd. They ended up tweeting out a statement, and the statement started with, "We are saddened that it has taken death, violence, and destruction to elevate the fact that inequality and systemic racism still run deep in many areas of the world," which is a very true statement, and I really appreciate the fact that they are hurt that everything bad that's being associated with what's happening right now is what it takes to bring to the light all of these actual big problems that are happening in the world and are happening in our country. Another thing that they said in the statement is that they want to have an open dialogue with their community about what they can do to make sure that the Overwatch League, Philadelphia Gaming, Philadelphia as a whole, and the country, the world as a whole, what they can do to make a difference. And I really appreciate that. They want to listen to the community, and they want to know what they can do to fix. And another thing about Overwatch that I really appreciate is it's a game about inclusivity. They represent so many people from all different parts of the world, all different walks of life, and they do it in a very nice, respectful way, which is something that I really appreciate about the game because it is all about inclusivity. So I really appreciate the fact that the Fusion did actually say something. The next team I want to talk about is the Philadelphia Union. They ended up tweeting out, "Philly, we love you." And that was on June 1st, and they are pretty much reiterating that they stand with everything about Philly. They really do appreciate what's happening in the protests. They've also gone on to say racism and hatred of any form is entirely unacceptable now or ever, and we will not tolerate social injustice. So they want to do everything that they can. They know that there's players in the MLS, there are players on their team who are black, who are people of color, and who have experienced this firsthand, and that they do not want this to continue. They really do want to fight against what's happening, which is once again, something that's greatly appreciated. Alejandro Bedoya, who is someone who has spoken out many times about gun violence in the country, he also tweeted out. He says that he really appreciates the support of what's going on in Philadelphia, and he actually posted a picture of him at the protest at the art museum. So he was down in the thick of it. He was down in the protests, and he was doing everything that he could to make his and Philadelphia's voice heard on the issue. And like I said, he's been very outspoken. I know there was a goal last season after, unfortunately, I can't remember what form of gun violence happened, but there was an incident that happened last year in which he scored a goal, then took to one of the field mics to express that the government, that government as a whole should come up with a change for what's happening in terms of gun violence, the gun use in this country, and that something should change. So it was very nice that he is still deep into the activism, into the protests, and into fighting the good fight. We're going to move on to the Philadelphia Phillies now. They have also put out a statement. And one thing, before I go any further, I really appreciate the fact that every single one of Philadelphia's teams put out a statement in regards to the protests, in regards to George Floyd, in regards to social injustice. They have all put something out which is incredible. And it's exactly why I love Philadelphia. It's exactly why I love these teams. And it's exactly why I'm a fan of all of them. The Phillies tweeted out that they stand in solidarity with everyone who's peacefully protesting, and that George Floyd's death was a senseless death, that forces us to confront the difficult truths about racism in America, which is very true, and I appreciate the fact that they are being upfront about what the issue is. A lot of teams did not want to comment on who was involved in the tragedy, what had happened in the tragedy, and how the tragedy unfolded. But at least being able to acknowledge that George Floyd's death was senseless, it had no point in terms of why it happened. It's just another point of racial injustice that's happening in this country. They've also said that the concept of brotherly love and sisterly affection has never been more important, and that they urge people to please be safe, respectful, and care for each other, which is so true. In Philadelphia, we do hold this kind of idea that, everyone who's from Philadelphia, everyone who's around you, you do love like a brother, you do love like a sister, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to fight for the people that are being hurt within our city and within our country. One of the players that stood out and spoke out and tweeted out, protested out, marched out was Andrew McCutchen, who we love dearly in the Philadelphia Phillies organization. And I'm going to read out his whole tweet that I just really appreciated. He says, "Where there is evil in this world, there is also good. But if we are surrounded by constant evil, good seems foreign and unrealistic. Some evils we cannot control, but for the ones that we can, resist and know that good overcomes evil." Now, there's the simple thing of reading that and understanding that racism in America is one of those evils that is very hard to control. It's not easy to control, but with people who have good hearts, good intentions, and good planning of what they're going to do, we'll be able to fight that and bring equality to the people that need to. On to the Eagles. On June 2nd, they put out their statement, and their statement was actually written by Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, who he's pretty much speaking for the entire Eagles organization. And one of the things he says, it's a time to listen. He recognized that he doesn't know all of the struggles of his players that are on the Eagles, who are black, who are people of color, who have had a lot of issues with police brutality or some kind of discrimination. But he appreciates that so many of the players on his teams, black and white, have spoken up on these issues. Carson Wentz was one of them. Our quarterback decided that he wanted to speak up, which is something that I know is appreciated across all of Philadelphia and the country. He expressed his heartbreak over the matter of George Floyd, and one of the things he says is the society we live in that doesn't value all human life, and he is right, unfortunately, that where we are right now, not everyone's lives are treated like they matter. Not everyone is treated with that same respect, and he overall mimics the same idea that racism in the United States of America needs to stop. Malcolm Jenkins was another mouthpiece. I know he's not a Philadelphia Eagle anymore, but he is still in Philadelphia. He has partaken in so many of the protests. I think every single one that I've seen from Philadelphia he has been at. He has been at the forefront, and he has been fighting everything that he can to make sure that the voices of the people are heard. His first video actually came out on May 27th, which was the first instance of any player that I saw, any team that I saw, and he was right there at the beginning. And so I really think that unfortunately we missed the chance to keep Malcolm Jenkins in Philadelphia, because not only is he a great player, but obviously we can see that he is a great human being. The Flyers are the next team that I want to talk about. They tweeted out on June 2nd their statement on everything. They said, "We don't have the answers," which I do sort of appreciate. Not everyone can have the answers. Not everyone can have the words that need or should be, could be said. It's a lot to process, and I think for the most part it should be okay to not have the answers, but as long as you are looking for the answers and you want to find the answers, is a very good thing. They say that they do want to join the chorus calling for justice. That was one of my favorite lines from any of the statements that were put out by any of the teams, because that's exactly what this is. This is all of us banding together, singing, screaming out for the government to hear that we want justice for the murders of people who have been killed unjustly, and the fact that the Flyers are going out and making that known as everyone else is very greatly appreciated. JVR, James Van Riemsdyk, he also tweeted out that he also has not had the most experience with racial injustice, but one of the things he said in his tweet was, "My eyes and ears are open to try to be part of the solution." He wants to be a part, he wants to understand, and he wants to learn, which is, in my opinion, and only my opinion, at least, I hope other people's opinion, is a very good thing, because he wants to be better, which is a great thing for human beings to do. And our captain, the captain, Claude Giroux, put out the statement of all statements, in my opinion. He says that he doesn't have as much experience either, that he's not used to seeing something like this, but he has so many great pieces in it. He says, "I am here, I see you, and I stand with you." And he's recognizing everything that's happened, and he is recognizing that he wants to be here, he wants to listen, he wants to learn, and he wants to stand next to everyone who is fighting this fight. He says that he didn't understand what it all meant before, because he was not used to being part of a very racially diverse background, but coming to Philadelphia, he learned that white people in general, seem to have white privilege, and that was something that he did not learn until he came to Philadelphia. But he says, "I can be better, I want to be better," which is such a powerful statement. And the the thing that I thought was so great is leave it to G to have a clutch period even when he's not playing in an NHL game. There's a part in his statement where he says that he wants to properly teach his son. And I think it's very important that he puts a period at the end of that sentence. And the next thing he says is to stand up for what is right. Because that's not only just saying that he wants to teach his son what is right and to stand up for what is right, but he himself is going to do that, which is taking a lot of ownership, taking a lot of responsibility, and proving that he is the captain, the leader that Philadelphia loves, deserves, and needs. The last thing that he ended the entire statement with is "You have my word," which is still one of the most touching things because G is a guy who you can absolutely count on, and he is a guy that if he makes a promise, he's going to keep it, and the fact that he is going to do everything that he can to fight racial inequality, and he's giving Philadelphia, America as a whole, his word on that. I fully believe that that is what he's going to do to help out with the cause as best as he can. The next team to talk about is the Philadelphia 76ers. I did talk about the fact that they are coming back into play at the end of July, probably in August. But the biggest factor right now is so many players are speaking up. Matisse Thybulle has been out in the streets during the protests. The same with Tobias Harris and Mike Scott. So many people. Ben Simmons even tweeted out. And there's a lot to go through, but the biggest one, in my opinion, the most prominent one, was Tobias. He was in the protests on May 30th. He ended up FaceTiming Mike Scott to allow him to also be at the protests. And one of the biggest things that came out of the week is he ended up writing an article for the Players Tribune that was called "Y'all Hear Us, But You Ain't Listening," which is another very strong statement that while so many people are able to hear what's being said, they're not being compassionate, they're not being filled with empathy, and they're not necessarily listening to what the people are saying. He speaks out about how he had a completely different experience than some people, but learning about social injustice, learning about systemic racism in the country ended up being something that was so important to him after he started playing in the NBA and learning about everything that's actually happening. And another thing that he said within the article, which I highly recommend everyone go read because it is incredibly informative for people who don't understand. It's a great piece that allows people to get a fuller picture of where he's coming from, where some of these athletes are coming from, and where you should be coming from. And he wants everyone to be comfortable with the idea of getting uncomfortable, with talking to your dad, your mom, your siblings, your neighbor, anyone that you see out there that is making racist jokes, racist remarks, showing any kind of equality in that way. And he wants people to be comfortable with the idea that they should not be comfortable with that, and to make people understand and not just hear but listen. He wants to hold everyone accountable, and another thing that he actually makes sure to talk about within his piece is that he wants the people to be held accountable to also be celebrities and athletes who have these big platforms of millions of followers, millions of people who are listening to everything that they're saying, and that they also should be held to the same standard as everyday Americans. And that was all just Tobias Harris on his own, with the Sixers backing him on everything, retweeting a lot of the quotes from the article, sharing pictures of him at the protest, sharing statements of his, and the Sixers are full force behind everything that's happened. They've also tweeted out they are striving for accountability and for the community to be treated with fairness, transparency, and dignity. And the thing that they ended up ending their statement with was, this is for our city, our country, this is for our future, and it's for each other. This is for everyone. This isn't just, this isn't what some people would call as a race war. This isn't black people versus white people. This is everyone against police brutality. This is everyone against social injustice. This is against systemic racism. This is something that will affect everyone within this country, and whittling it down in this state, in this city, and it's for all of the people that we call our brothers and sisters because we live in this city, so I think it's very nice that they are saying that this is for so many more people than most people may think. Ben Simmons and Shake Milton were also two of the people that have tweeted out and spoken out in regards to the protest. Ben Simmons shared a Nike video, which was very strong. And if you remember, Nike ended up backing Colin Kaepernick a few years ago after he took the whole kneeling during the national anthem and got a lot of flack, a lot of pushback from that. And they have put out a very strong video. Once again, another piece of media that I think is very important for people to go out and watch. And with that, he tweeted that you can't turn your back. He says, don't turn your back on racism, because too many people just go, oh, well, that's just Dave being Dave. That's just Dad being Dad. That's just someone being someone. And so they kind of turn a blind eye to it. They turn their back. They're not paying attention to it because that's just people being who they are, and they're not growing. They're not changing. Shake Milton ended up tweeting out that he's tired of having names turn into just a distant memory, which is so real of a statement, because too many times something like this happens. Someone gets murdered by the police. Someone gets murdered unjustly, and we remember that name for a short time, and unfortunately, after a while, we don't seem to remember. Only a few kind of stick out, which is such a shame, because all of these people deserve to have justice. And he ends his statement with saying, enough is enough, because what's happening is not right. Now, the last team for me to talk about is the Philadelphia Wings. The thing that they did is they shared a video that featured Trevor Baptiste speaking on his experiences and what he sees everything as, which, in my opinion, is a lot better than a statement from the organization. It is not, someone making a statement because they feel that they need to make a statement. They are sharing their players' thoughts and opinions on that, which I think is just as important as the whole company going, this is what's going to happen, this is, what we're saying, and we're just putting a press release out. Because if Drew Brees has showed us anything, you don't want to just put a press release out for the sake of putting out a press release and saving face. They do share their support, and they do want to fight against racism and social injustice, which was the caption above the video on their tweet, which is great because the NLL, the Wings as a whole, is another team that is multicultural, which has so many different walks of life on it, and they do want to fight so that way everyone can be seen and heard all in the same light. But Trevor Baptiste spoke so real in his video. Not many other players I've seen have sat down and done a testimonial where they're looking straight into the camera, they're giving their thoughts, and you could tell that everything that Trevor was saying is exactly what he thinks and believes. In the whole thing, he talks about his experiences and that lacrosse as a whole doesn't seem to be a very diverse sport. It seems to be, in the areas that he grew up in the areas that he played in, it was very white, and that he was kind of the only anomaly. He was the only black person that was playing during that time. And one of the things that he mentioned that seemed very key to me is growing up at an early age with his friends. A comment that he would get a lot that he didn't think much of growing up was his friends would go, "Oh, well, you're not like black. You're like white black," which is a statement that I feel like a lot of white people who have black friends sadly can probably relate to, can probably think back to a moment that they've said, which a lot of what he says ends up holding a lot of weight, because in some ways his experience is very the same as mine. I won't say it's necessarily the same, but there's a lot of similarities to how he grew up. And I won't say that I grew up as experiencing some of the things he experienced, but something like that, saying, "Oh, you're white black," is unfortunately something that I can remember in my past. And he ends his whole video asking a question, polling a question to all the people that are watching, anyone that has taken a part of this, which I thought was so interesting. He asks people what being black meant to them, and he says it doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, if you're Native American, if you're Asian, it doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are. What does it mean to you? Because he's taking the idea of, well, you're not black, you're white black. That means that inherently some people have this idea of what a black person is, what they act like, how they talk, and the way their demeanor comes off, which I think is so interesting. And he ends that whole statement by saying, "Now think about what you're going to do to change that." So as a whole, that's something that has resonated with me over the past week. And so right now I want to share my thoughts. I don't necessarily post on social media all too much. I don't tweet out a lot. I don't share things on Facebook. Occasionally I'll put things on Instagram. But I know that being silent during this time is the wrong thing to do. To speak out is one of the best things that you can do, which is why these protests are so incredibly important. And so the first thing I want to do is answer Trevor Baptiste's question. And to me, being black really just means that they are a person with a different past, a person with different experiences, a person with a different culture. And unfortunately, that's not what it means to so many other people in the world. That being black carries a stigma of, unfortunately, people think dangerous, people think criminal, people think that you have to know how to rap and dance, and a lot of other stereotypes that are as unfair as saying any other stereotype in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of people just kind of turn their back and they turn a blind eye to the whole situation. So the most important thing that I can say is, yes, Black Lives Matter. Because without them, we wouldn't be a whole country. Without everyone that is part of the United States of America, we wouldn't be a whole. Because this is supposed to be the land where everyone can go for freedom, where everyone can go to believe in their dreams and achieve what they want. And unfortunately, a large group of the people can't do that because the system, the people that are there to enforce the laws, the people that are there supposed to protect them and everyone, are failing them. I don't have a lot of words that other people have said in relation to the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, the murder of so many other people at the hands of the police. But my thought was, I love sports. I love Philadelphia, and I love the players on these teams. And I love talking about them. And these are the people, these are the organizations, these are the teams that I choose to represent me and that I let represent the city that I love. And it's incredible to me that all of the teams spoke out, because some cities that have teams didn't. There are some places out there that didn't say anything, and I think that is wrong. So it brings me so much pride that thousands of people in Philadelphia are protesting, and that all of the teams, all of the things that so many people in Philadelphia love. People love to cheer for the Eagles. People love to cheer for the Flyers, the Phillies, the Sixers, the Fusion, the Union, and the Wings. That they are all taking the stance, and they are all doing everything that I want to say, that I want to do, but I don't have the platform for. I don't have the money for. And I think what I could do is talk about those teams, talk about what's been said, talk about what they're doing, and do what I can to promote what is a multicultural, multiracial form of entertainment that we love so much and that is coming back. So with that being said, this is going to be a very different episode of the Orange Line. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate that. One of the biggest things that we can do in this time is listen, is learn, and to be there for each other. So with that all being said, thank you for listening to the Orange Line. I am going to keep this board updated with everything that is going to be happening for Philadelphia sports in the future. Every single match, every single training camp, everything that needs to be talked about in Philadelphia. And I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure everyone that is represented on this show, that is represented by these teams, by this city, is going to be fair, is going to be just, and is going to be equal. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all very dearly. Please be safe and have a good night.